Hello and welcome to another episode of Around the Verse. I'm Sandy Gardner.
And I'm Eric Kyron Davis.
This week, Jared Huckabee brings us another installment of Shipshape, with looks at the Anvil Hurricane and something new from a manufacturer we haven't heard from in a while.
You're definitely going to want to stick around for that. But first, let's drop in again on Ricky Jutley for your weekly dose of roadmap goodness and another Star Citizen project update.
Show us what's new for the PU, Ricky.
Thanks, guys. Let's get things started and take a look at the roadmap. The PMA-VMA has been integrated into the item kiosks. Working on a boot sequence planned for the kiosk monitors, the intention is to animate the character shown on the kiosk to specifically show off weapons and clothing as the player is browsing through options. Wireframe for the shopping flow continues to be worked on. Speaking of the PMA and VMA, Mobiglass improvements continue, with gameplay teams adjusting the arm position to better match the target, adding fade in and out to the loading screens, and integrating tooltip on the app buttons to reveal what each app is when you hover over it. As a result of these adjustments, the button press is misaligned at the moment, and the animation team will be helping to get that back in line with the app projection graphics. A quantum travel bug causing ships to spin out of control upon coming out of QT was recently fixed. Turns out the game was storing mouse moves made during the quantum travel process and executing them all in short order upon exit. And the gameplay teams have been working on streamlining the quantum travel process for better functionality and ease within the developing group system, with UI mockups for quantum linking almost complete and calibration-based implementation for the feature in progress. Looking forward to future releases, VFX has been doing scanning R&D for visuals and the way that the scanning grid is implemented in a cockpit. This is very early prototypical work, and the team is taking feedback from Chris Roberts and others into account as they continue to research and tweak the mechanic. VFX has also been doing R&D on a very experimental particle spline emitter that could potentially be used to create various space anomalies like Aurora Borealis, energy pulsing through the coil, and more elaborate and diverse explosions. The ship team have been looking at the interiors of the Aegis Hammerhead, performing colour palette tests to determine which colour and lighting combinations work best, with early work continuing on the bridge, cargo room and captain's quarters. On the Origin 600i, the exploration module is complete, and work on the ship's escape pods and interior corridors is almost complete. As we finish designing the escape pods, the ship team is putting their heads together with design and animation in order to nail down how the functionality and animation will work with game mechanics. Meanwhile, the rework of the consolidated Outland Mustang line is ongoing, with the ship now in the final art stages. The props team have continued their work on the hangar props, adding more heavy machinery to the set to bring movement and life to the utilitarian hangars. The utilitarian material has gone through a polish, improving the wear to give a harsher transition between the layers of paint and surfaces that have accumulated over years of use and maintenance. And here we see their work on a modular cable set, which has been whiteboxed and handed over to the environment art team for validation before taking them further through the art pipeline. The tech art team has been prototyping procedural prop placement. Work is being done on different layouts to add variety to rooms. The systems can be used for decals on walls, exteriors, and usable items as well. When using the tool, a designer can place a volume in the environment, which can be named or tagged to indicate a prop or a collection of props to be spawned. The tool will specify the category, type of prop, dimensions, branding, and theme. The props are set up to allow a layered approach to these volumes, where a certain volume placed by design could suggest an object with smaller objects on top of it, which in turn specifies smaller volumes. For instance, a designer could spawn a table which has a volume allowing for something to spawn on top of it. The volume could be tagged to spawn one of a variety of plates, which would also have a volume to spawn food. The food could also spawn something, like a fork or knife stuck into it. The tech can be applied to many different prop sets, and designers can increase the variation through creating more elaborate setups via prefab libraries. The environment art team is focused on visual development for Hurston and its moons, set to be released in Alpha 3.3. Here we see recent work done on components of Lorville, Hurston's main landing zone. That's all for this week. We'll see you next time with more PU progress. Back to you in the studio.
That's cool stuff, Ricky. It's going to be really fun watching the progression of Alpha 3.2 features over the next couple of months as they really start coming together. Remember, you can always follow along with development yourself via our public roadmap on the website.
That's right. And for an overview of the work done on the PU, as well as Squadron 42 over the last month, check out Comlinks for our latest monthly report.
Yeah, we'll have another project update next week. Now, who's ready for a shipload of new info? Sandy?
Yep, I'm ready.
All right. Let's go to Jared for our double dose of shipshape.
Greetings, citizens, and welcome to another brand new edition of Shipshape, where we take a look at what's on the ship pipeline, who's working on what, provide interviews with developers, and sometimes, just, sometimes, I let people pick my new favorite ship in the comments below the video. And that, in turn, forces me to do something I don't want to do. I'm your host, content manager, Jared Huckabee. Now, behind me, you see the ship pipeline. That's the ever-evolving, continuously refined network of phases, milestones, and review points necessary to ensure you the best possible spaceship or vehicle for your Star Citizen experience. Like the 300 series rework, which is still in design review. It's scheduled to resume its journey later this year. We've also got the Origin 100i, which we introduced in last month's show, which is, of course, concept complete. The Orion, massive mining vessel that it is. It's currently on hold pending additional resources. That means there's no ETA available for that at this time. Also, absolutely nothing in Gray Box. Nothing to talk about there at all. All told, there are 64 different ships and vehicles that have already made their journey through the pipeline and are now available in the Star Citizen universe, with another 52 on their way. Actually, you know what? We're going to have to make that 55 after today's show. That's because it's my honor to introduce to you 3 brand new additions to Star Citizen's pantheon of spaceships. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, I hope it's Aegis! Well, let me tell you, fine citizen, at this point, there are no more plans for Aegis ships for the remainder of 2018. I know, I couldn't believe it either. So what is it then? Drake, RSI, both worthy manufacturers for new additions, but instead we're going all the way back to where my work with the ships of Star Citizen began. Yes, it's time to reintroduce the world to Crusader Industries and their brand new line of military-grade transport ships, the Hercules Starlifter. Now, whether it's the M2 mil-spec rated to transport ground vehicles like the Cyclone or Nova tank into the thickest war zones, the C2 civilian cargo variant meant to carry large-scale cargo as safely and securely as possible, or the devastating A2 Hercules gunship that's meant to bring the pain down upon anyone and anything in its path, Crusader Industries is back and ready to make its presence felt in the Star Citizen universe. Let's check in with the team members in our Manchester studio who are working to bring the new Hercules Starlifter to life.
The Crusader Starlifter, this is a new ship, new role, and for me and the team, a new manufacturer. This is the transporter, sort of military transporter ship, basically. It's got quite a large cargo capacity, so it can hold up to 2 Tumble tanks. So that's some hefty firepower that you can store inside it. And then we've got the 3 variants, depending on which, what role you want to play and what piece of the game you want to take on. So the base variant, this is more like your sort of commercial hauler. It comes in the white, red and black livery. Looks pretty cool. It has full cargo capacity, essentially like a roll-on, roll-off type of situation. So it has ramp at the front, ramp at the back. So we can just, like I said, you can roll tanks up and then roll them off. It comes with four turrets, essentially unmanned turrets. Sort of 2 on the neck and then 2 on the back. So it has, decent amount of firepower, basically. Obviously it comes with the VTOLs, standard interior, so that's sort of split into 2. So you've got the main cargo section, then there's a lift at the side that takes you up, and that sort of takes you into the main sort of habitation, sort of guts of the ship. So basically you can get from there into small hab zone and then the bridge.
If it would be in our world, it could be used by the UN, for example, to reach certain areas in danger, to supply the people or to help the people there.
After that we got the military variant, which is the M2 Hercules. It has an heavy armor on one size 3 remote turrets at the front, which is basically just under the nose, so it's even more firepower at the front. It's basically mostly the same ship. It just, do I want the regular variant with more cargo capabilities, or do I want the military variant, which is a bit more heavily protected and a bit more guns?
It comes in different livery, so it comes in the greys. And then we've got the full-on gunship version, which is, you know, this is does exactly as it says on the tin. I mean, this is basically the full hopped up, full firepower. Comes with 4 additional unmanned turrets, and also you lose half of the cargo space, so you still have a fair amount of space to bring stuff with you. But in that space, well, basically you'll have an option of using either the equivalent of MOABs, you know, mother of all bombs. So you'll have 4 of those that can be stacked, like it's two either side, and they're sort of at an angle and they sort of just drop down and then through the floor. Or sort of a modular unit for sort of bomblets. So we've worked out sort of again a small modular unit that we can slot in. So you'll have 4 of these. So you and your buddies can run in, up the lift, run to where your sort of command station is, get in your chair, screen comes down, and then you know you're essentially looking through the eyes of the gun, and then you're all shooting away. So. Yeah, I think that's going to be a pretty hefty one for sure.
Also, the gunship has the guns more focused on the bottom of the hull. Imagine it's almost 100 meters long, 70 meters wide. So it's not a dogfight ship. You have additional seats where soldiers can control the guns. That's quite nice. The interior design between the gunship and the basic version, for example, is quite different when you're in the cargo area, because you have all the new equipment for the bomb systems. There's also an additional seat in the cockpit area. The additional guns on the gunship, they changed the shape quite a bit, because it's up to, at the basic version you have S3 and S4 guns, and at the gunship version you have several S5 guns too.
So it's always interesting to work on new manufacturers, basically new to us. You know, obviously Chris had worked earlier in the project, and they'd worked on the Genesis Starliner, which is more of a airliner, you know, just for, you know, it's for carrying people, passenger airliner basically. There's already some existing art language, design language for that. In Star Citizen now, we're generally sort of trying to get things into quite different categories. So you know, okay, that's Crusader, that's Aegis, that's Anvil. In the past, we've had some crossover, and you know, we're trying to keep things quite separate where possible. And so on this, you know, there were just some key shapes that we've taken. It's literally just, you know, there's a certain profile of that Starliner that is very similar that we've sort of taken. But with the, you know, with the Starlifter, it's a different role of ship, isn't it? So we didn't want it just to be a standard military carrier. So Mike's done a good job of taking the functionality and taking those sort of initial styling cues that we wanted, and then advancing it. And you know, that's always the best part for a concept artist. It's new, it's fresh. You know, they've got a lot more freedom to define things.
As usual, I like to start with just simple thumbnail sketches, just black and white. And then doing different versions of them, selecting best solutions of the sketches, and then let's say 2 or 3 and continue with those. So I took 2 sketches into 3D, made a rough concept block out of them, and then there was a final decision between those two. And then after you have the rough final hull idea of the overall ship and interior, you go ahead with a bit more into detail, not too much, but yeah, you start defining the shapes and how it fits with the interior. You continue with the interior and adjust the exterior and so on, till you can focus on buttons in the cockpit.
We had some concerns at some points, like, isn't that too many guns? Isn't that like too much firepower? But we've tried to balance it as much as possible, so that's why the guns that are on the gunship are not facing forward. So, like, for example, a single player, if he was just alone in his gunship, it wouldn't really make a big difference with a military ship. If you want to fly the gunship, you need to have friends or AI with it, so they can fire the guns towards the ground or toward the side. It's more an air-to-ground combat design. The guns are angled on the side, but they are more angled a bit downwards as well. So obviously it's not like real planes where real-life gunships will try to circle around a position, because those are spaceships. You don't really have to circle around, but this is still, you have to angle a bit to be sure that you can hit this way or both way at the same time.
I mean, Mike did like, I don't know, 30 or so initial sketches. And then from those probably developed another 10 and just building up. And my job is really to sort of work with Mike to basically get us to a point where we've got a couple or 3 solutions for Chris to choose from. On this occasion it was dialed down to 2, and as Mike was saying, one definitely was more sci-fi. Both really good, like strong silhouettes, strong form language, and then it just comes down to Chris. What does he want? The version that people are seeing now is the version that Chris went with. And initially I don't think we'd really sort of factored in the VTOLs, and they became a big feature of the ship. And we, as the design developed, would still sort of reference back to the Starliner. And we still got the key things here that we want to keep. Starliner is basically like a double wing. We haven't kept the fan, but I wanted to keep that sort of double wing with the negative space. So you see that very much like in the front shot of the vehicle. And again, it was just sort of keeping the hump of the head and the sort of slender neck, and then a little bit of a hump at the back, a little bit of a spoiler. And then that, after that, it sort of tails off into its own thing. And with all these things, it's you're in constant development. The next one we'll do, we'll advance a little more. We'll be like, okay, currently we've got these 3 things that we hang our hat on, that we always use for our design. Oh, we've got these other 2 things now that we like. That makes, that becomes part of the style guide. It's always got to have these things.
I think the biggest challenge for me was the poor size of it. When you compare it to the Hawk, which was my ship I did before, it was like this size, the Hawk. And now you have the Starlifter is like this. So yeah, and then designing this in the same amount of time, with much more content, it's quite challenging. Yeah.
So obviously, well, it's not going to fly before a while, but this is, we have the dimensions. We are sure that we can fit 2 tanks inside. We can fit the specific amount of cargo units. We can check all the components inside. Will the ejection seats work? Will the player be able to walk inside without any issues? Will there be any issues in terms of atmosphere? Will there be any issues in terms of metrics? So obviously all of this we already checked.
I'm really looking forward to see the behavior when it's flying in atmosphere, how it changes from flight mode to landing mode with the VTOLs on the side, because there are some kind of separated wings which can rotate, and when it's landing.
In a traditional sort of strict sense of what this vehicle would be imagined to be used for, yeah, it would be that. It would be softening up the enemy. You take out their defences, then you can come in, land. You know, with having with those large VTOLs, you can land pretty much anywhere, unload your ground forces. So, you know, yeah, we're looking at, you know, it can hold 2 tumbrils, but the community, who knows, will probably load up 200 people. Do you know what I mean? It'll be like, we don't know what will happen, but yeah, you could have a mini army just roll out the back, and yeah, you'll have clans who will have not just one, they'll have multiple. So yeah, just like in the promo shots we've done, you could have essentially a task force coming in and just completely taking over somewhere and just blitzing it.
Ramps in the front and back, cargo capacity enough to hold 2 immense Nova tanks, size 4 guns, manned turrets, remote turrets, and a gunship variant all combined to make this Hercules capable of completing any labor set before it. That's a classical lit joke. Now, you'll be able to get your hands on the brand new Hercules Starlifter from Crusader Industries when its concept promotion opens to everyone on May 11th. But before we get to our next feature, let's get a quick update on a few more ships making their way through the ship pipeline. In gray box phase, the Constellation Phoenix has made it all the way to the gray box final approval stage. And as you may have already seen from Sandy's social media accounts, tech designers have already begun the process of hooking up things like the doors and the seats, while ships like the Mustang, the Blade, the Eclipse, and the Hurricane are all continuing their journeys through the final art phase. Now, ships like the Hurricane are scheduled to come online with Alpha 3.2 at the end of this quarter. So let's check in now with some of the team working on that ship that introduced the phrase glass hammer to the Star Citizen universe.
The Anvil Hurricane is a hard-hitting, anti-capital ship type craft. It's still in the same kind of shape and styling of a dogfighter like you'd see with the Sabre or the Super Hornet, but its strength really comes from being able to leverage the 4 size 3 guns on its manned turret against a larger target.
What was interesting about the Hurricane specifically, it's got some shapes on it that aren't really common on many Anvil ships. So what you'll notice is that you've got sweeping lines that go from the nose all the way to the wing, and some lines that go all the way from the nose over the back all the way to the tail. So you have the circle turret on the back, and you've got a lot of sort of flat shapes and vertical stabilizers. So the first thing I had to do was sort of approach the ship slightly differently than we do other Anvil ships. So you'll notice that the wing flows directly into the side of the body, which flows directly into the nose. It was also really cool to work on it because I was able to incorporate almost directly elements from other Anvil ships like the Gladiator. What's cool about this ship in particular is that we physically have separated the position of the gunner and the pilot, so there's no conflict between the enter and exits between those two. But I was able to do a pretty refined sort of mechanism for pulling the seat up and then also ejecting out of the pilot seat. So it's got a rail that's separate from the seat and everything sort of mounted together in a really cool way.
The idea with this is you've got a pilot and a gunner team working in concert with each other, where the pilot is finding and setting the best lines to give the turret gunner the longest on-target field of fire to whatever they're attacking.
But on the flip side, it's got sort of poor armor, poor shielding. So on its own, you know, it's kind of, you know, it's a bit of a gamble how you'll do in a fight. Like, you know, if it's the classic, you're coming out of the sun and, you know, take someone by surprise, chances are you'll just blow them out of the water, no problem. But if you're spotted, then you're probably going to have some issues.
So the Hurricane's turret is a bespoke setup that we've made just for this ship. Normally a turret is only going to have a pair of guns total on it. With this one, we decided to make it a quad laser type setup. So it's got 2 guns on either side of the turret, just more throughput to it. And giving the ship the ample power and cooling throughput to actually handle all of those guns firing at full force as long as possible. So we're adding the Hurricane because we want something where you can kind of get that swarm of fighters approaching, but that swarm is going to tear apart a large target. Think of it almost like a swarm of army ants or fire ants coming at a piece of carrion on the ground. They're going to pass over that, and there's not going to be anything left but bones in its wake. And that's sort of the idea, where you get a wing of Hurricanes working together. Maybe you put a vanguard in, sort of as a spearhead for that wing to take some of the damage from whatever target you're fighting, and you're going to put a tremendous amount of damage on whatever target you want to. They're not gonna hold up that well on their own against sustained fire, but you put a pack of them together, they're going to just shred things apart.
It's difficult because you know that it's got to be part of the family, and for players and for the community, you want something that's slightly different, but it's where to push and pull, where to go wild or not. And so there was a lot of sort of hopping around on this one, especially in the early stages. And then remember there was one key stage we hit where it looked really good, really solid. It was hitting all the sort of key beats. And then yeah, we kind of, ideally we should have just gone, it would have been nice straight road from A to Z. But we sort of meandered. And so when you sort of look at that initial sketch and the final sketch, they're not really that far apart, but we did do a bit of a crazy loop to get to there. But it's kind of, for me, it's just part of the process. I personally want to make sure that we've investigated the options and not just plumped for the obvious thing. I want to make sure that, let's look at something that gives it more of a fragile nature. Let's look at adding extra fins or taking off fins, adding a bit of more gladiator influence or more Hornet influence, and just see where that takes it. So there's always that process.
So the cockpit on this particular ship is a little bit more minimalist than other Anvil ships. So we still have a bunch of buttons all over the place, which correspond to every system in the game. But for the most part, the dashboard is very clean. We're not adding tons of detail in areas just for the sake of adding them on this one. We're keeping the player view, we're trying to keep the player view as clean as possible. And any details that we have are meant to mostly be functional. So the cockpit in this particular ship is a little bit more minimalist than your average Anvil ship. But the cockpit in the turret, I think, is extremely cool, because that thing, you basically are sitting in a bubble surrounded by weapons. And when you start firing, you can see the muzzle flash of each gun around you just going off. So it feels like you are the gun firing. And that thing is super cool.
I've got the style guide. We know, here's are the key things. Here are the key beats that need to be hit. We can do variety within those beats in terms of proportion and placing. But those are the things that are important to this brand. And so the ship has followed that, and in terms of its line work, split lines. I mean, the ship comes across as a little more, not complex, but slightly higher manufacturing kind of ability. So it's a little sleeker in places. But generally, there'll be familiarities in terms of what you see in the Gladiator and what you see in the Hurricane. I think the sort of increase in skill needed for the ship could well be a selling point. I think it'll be, I think it's going to probably divide the community. You're going to have people who are like, I don't want to touch this ship with a barge pole because I'm just going to get shot to pieces, and that'd probably be me. And then you're going to have players who are just like, yeah, I'm going to take this on. Let's see what we can do with it. And with that firepower, there are other games which I can't mention, but they have those sort of similar mechanics where you have just got massive firepower, and you just you take a chance, see if you can get away with it. Dare I say, would you be the griefer? I'm not quite sure, but I think it'll be fun, yeah.
The benefit of the Hurricane over, say, a bomber like a Gladiator or an Eclipse against a larger target is going to be just sustained throughput. Ordnance, so missiles, torpedoes, rockets, anything like that, it's a finite supply on any ship that carries it. Laser blasts aren't as finite. As long as you've got a functional power plant and functional coolers, you can keep shooting. And so it's that sustained throughput that's going to give the Hurricane its advantage in fighting these larger targets, because a retaliator comes in, drops all of its torpedoes in a big salvo. We'll say, anti-missile systems take out a couple of those torpedoes, or one of the torpedoes manages to hit, a fully shielded face. That retaliator isn't going to wait 20 seconds, 30 seconds for its systems to sort of cool down a bit and fire another volley. They're going to be out of ammo. Whereas the Hurricane, okay, I messed up on one pass. Well, the pilot can find a new line. We do another pass, zip down the ship, zip down the target, and keep just pushing out that steady throughput of damage on target. The Hurricane definitely feels like it's the kind of ship that's going to appeal the most to teams of players wanting to pick on bigger targets. It can punch above its weight class, and then it gets hit once in the wrong spot, and it's going to go spiraling a bit. It's a fun ship, but it's not the kind of thing that you want to try and go picking fights with more purebred dogfighters in.
Just take a look at the nose. I think it has an incredibly aggressive nose. There's a lot of detail in there. It looks like a really angry face, and I think that sort of reflects what it's supposed to feel like when this thing's bearing down on you. Just get out of the way, man.
Let's just call this thing the pew-pew edition of shipshape, huh? I mean, seriously, you can admire that ship from any angle, but not the front. Do not get in front of that thing. Now, before we bring this edition of shipshape to a close, I promised to do a thing. Last episode, I said I didn't know how to pick my favorite from among Star Citizen's now 119 different ships and vehicles, and that instead I'd let the comments below the video decide a new favorite for me. Well, in what some might have called predictable fashion, you fine citizens overwhelmingly suggested that my new favorite ship should be the Carrack. Now, I was going to do this silly thing here, but I figured you'd rather some real information about this very popular exploration ship. So, I don't have much, but what I can tell you right now is that because the Reclaimer has been implemented in Alpha 3.1, a very small team of artists that worked on that ship, after finishing some other minor tasks we need them to, do first, those guys will move onto the Carrack. Now, this small team is scheduled to do a couple months of what we call R&D, where they flesh out things like the Anvil Style Guide as it applies to ships that are much larger than something like the Hurricane, as well as adjust the interior design in line with everything we've learned since the concept was first introduced in 2014. Which, let me tell you, that's a lot. Now, when they're done with those sprints, the team will expand and work will begin proper on bringing this fabled ship to life. So what does that mean, timeline-wise? Well, while everything is still subject to shifting priorities and schedules, work by this small R&D team is currently scheduled to begin next month. So, does that mean that we're going to see the Carrack in 2018? It does not. At this moment, it's a 2019 ship, and it's not on the public roadmap that's already available for first quarter 2019, so you should adjust your expectations accordingly. It's gonna be a long road to bringing the Carrack to life, but since we get better at this with each and every ship we make, I think we can all agree that the wait will almost certainly be worth it. For Shipshape, I'm the guy that tracks all the ship stuff, Jared Huckabee. Back to you, Eric and Sandy.
Thank you, Jared. As mentioned, haven't seen a ship from Crusader Industries in some time. And the Hercules looks like a worthy follow-up to the Genesis.
Yes, another big, useful ship from Crusader. Keep an eye out for more information on the Hercules and the upcoming concept promotion.
Our Intel screenshot contest continues, and we've had a lot of really impressive entries so far, with Hazgaha taking home the prize in round 1 for his dramatic capture. Yeah. Check it out. Check out Spectrum for a closer look at these awesome shots and find out how to enter for the chance to win your own Intel Optane 900p solid-state drive.
And tickets are available for CitizenCon, and we welcome you to join us on October 10th at the Long Center in Austin, Texas. Check the official comm link for details, and while you're on the website, don't forget to enlist to receive our Squadron 42 newsletter for project updates and development highlights from the game.
That's all for this week. Make sure to tune in to this week's new Lore Maker's Guide to the Galaxy for a tour of the OSSO system and Calling All Devs for answers to questions about the planet's Crusader, Hurston, and more.
And don't miss this week's Reverse the Verse live at 9 a.m. PDT for Q&A on the Hercules, following its reveal on today's Ship Shape. Thanks, and as always, to our subscribers for sponsoring all of these shows.
Yes, and of course, thank you to all of the backers. Your support makes it possible for us to deliver truly remarkable gaming experiences.
So until next time, we will
We'll
see you
around the verse.
Thanks for watching. For the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42, you can subscribe to our channel, or you can check out some of the other shows, and you can also head to our website at www.robertsspaceindustries.com. Thank you very much for watching.